Detective Recap here. Today, I'm going to explain a mystery thriller film called Basic Instinct. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. When former rock star, Johnny Boz, is murdered, SFPD Detective Nick Curran is called in to investigate. Nick and his partner, Detective Gus Moran, investigate the crime scene and enter the victim's room. There, they see Captain Talcott, the other detectives, and the forensics team already working. On the bed is Johnny's blood-covered body with his hands tied to the bed's metal headboard with a white scarf. Nick and Gus learn that the time of death is around 2 o'clock in the morning, and Walker informs them that Johnny was last seen leaving the club with his girlfriend around midnight. When Nick asks for the murder weapon, one of the detectives gives him a bloody ice pick inside a sealed plastic. He is also told that Johnny's seat is all over the sheets, making everyone laugh except the captain, who tells them that the victim was a respectable man and a major contributor to the mayor's campaign. Nick then asks Walker for the name of Johnny's girlfriend, and he replies that it's Catherine Trammell before giving Nick her address. Nick and Gus waste no time in visiting Catherine. When a blonde woman comes downstairs, Nick informs her that they have a few questions for her, while the woman asks them if they're from the Vice Squad. Nick answers that they're from the Homicide Division, then Gus asks the woman when she last saw Johnny. Without batting an eye, the woman asks them if Johnny's dead. Gus wants to know what makes her think that, and she casually retorts that they wouldn't be there otherwise. Ignoring her comment, Gus asks if she was with Johnny the previous night, so she informs them that they're looking for Catherine and not her. She then tells them that her name is Roxy and that she's Catherine's friend. Finally, Nick asks Roxy where Catherine is, and they leave after she tells them. Upon arriving at the address, Nick and Gus find Catherine smoking on the balcony. After Nick introduces himself and Gus to her, she tells them that she knows who they are before asking them how Johnny died. When Nick explains that he was murdered with an ice pick, Catherine only smiles, and they ask her how long she's been dating the victim. She boldly corrects them, saying that she wasn't dating Johnny, she was just sleeping with him. It turns out that they've been sleeping together for a year and a half now and that she was with Johnny the night of the murder. They had a drink at the club then left together, but Catherine didn't come home with him since she went back to her place. Nick continues interrogating Catherine, asking her if there was anyone with her the previous night, but she taunts him, saying there was no one with her since she wasn't in the mood. Looking her straight in the eye, Nick asks Catherine if she's sorry Johnny's dead, and Catherine answers that she is, adding that she likes sleeping with him. Suddenly, Catherine tells them that she's not in the mood to talk anymore, so Gus lets her know that they can take her to the station for questioning if she doesn't cooperate. Unflinching, Catherine dares Gus to arrest her. When Gus doesn't do anything, she rudely tells the men to leave. After his interview with Catherine, Nick goes straight to his psychologist, Dr. Beth Garner's office. When asked how everything's going on with his life, Nick admits that his dating life has become boring since they stopped dating, adding that he hasn't had a drink in 3 months. Beth asks him if he's still using coke, and Nick denies it before proudly telling her that he even stopped smoking. After answering Beth's questions, Nick tells her to inform the Internal Affairs Department that he's all right, and Beth agrees. As Nick leaves, Beth tells him that she still misses him, but he doesn't even turn around to look at her. During their briefing, Nick and Gus are told that Johnny sustained 31 stab wounds in the neck and chest area. There are no usable prints found on the scene, no signs of forced entry, and nothing is missing. There are no prints on the ice pick, either, and the expensive scarf found in Johnny's room is Hermes. They also found high-quality coke in the scene, and Johnny inhaled it, leaving minute quantities on his lips and private parts. After hearing the report on Johnny's death, Gus wants to know more about Catherine, and Captain Talcott asks Walker if she's a suspect, and on what basis. After Walker confirms that she is one, he gives a profile of the 30-year-old woman. She has a clean record and graduated magna cum laude at Berkeley in 1983, majoring in literature and psychology. Catherine's parents were killed in a boating accident in 1979, leaving her the sole heir to their estimated assets of $110 million. Catherine was also engaged to Manuel Vasquez, a former middleweight contender, who was killed in the ring in 1984. To complete Catherine's profile, Walker tells everyone that Catherine is a writer and has written a novel under a pen name about a former rock and roll star who gets murdered by his girlfriend. Later that day, Nick reads Catherine's novel, Love Hurts, and calls his partner to tell him that in the book, the murderer killed the victim using an ice pick, with the victim's hands tied to the bed with a white scarf. The following morning, the homicide department holds a meeting with Beth Garner and Dr. Lamont to discuss the killer's behavior. According to Dr. Lamont, it's either the author is the murderer who acted out the killing described in the novel, or someone has read the book and enacted the killing to incriminate Catherine. When Nick asks Dr. Lamont what kind of person they're dealing with, if it was the author who murdered Johnny, the doctor says they're dealing with a devious and diabolical mind. He says that the book needed at least months or years to be written, which means that the writer must have planned the murder years ago, and the fact that she carried it out indicates psychopathic obsessive behavior. In layman's terms, Beth explains that the author has intended the book to be her alibi and that Catherine will probably tell them that she's not dumb enough to kill someone in the exact same way that's described in her novel. When Nick asks what if the perp was someone who has read the book, Dr. Lamont infers that they're dealing with a person who is so obsessed that they are willing to kill an innocent person just to incriminate the author. In conclusion, they're all dealing with someone very dangerous and very ill. Nick and Gus go to Catherine's house to invite her for questioning, and while waiting for her, Nick sees an old newspaper containing the article about his involvement with shooting tourists. He asks Catherine if she always keeps old newspapers around, and she replies that only when they're worth reading. As Gus informs her of her right to an attorney, Catherine dismisses the idea of having one. On the way to the station, Gus inquires if she's writing another book, to which she says that she is. This time, it's about a detective who falls for the wrong woman. Curious, Nick asks her what happens to the detective, and Catherine casually replies that the woman will kill him. At the station, Nick informs everyone that Catherine has waived her rights to an attorney. She's confident that she has nothing to hide. Assistant District Attorney John Corelli starts the investigation, and Catherine gives provocative answers while smoking. She and Johnny slept together for a year and a half, and she liked sleeping with him because he wasn't afraid of experimenting. When Walker questions her about the white silk scarf she described in the book, Catherine expresses her preference for such scarves. Without beating around the bush, John asks Catherine if she killed Johnny. And just as Beth had guessed, Catherine claims that she'd be stupid to kill someone the way she described it in her novel. After a few more questions, Catherine tells the detectives that she'd used coke with Johnny before, and to everyone's surprise, she asks Nick if he slept with anyone while on coke. Then, Catherine playfully crosses her legs, intentionally exposing herself to distract the men. She continues taunting the detectives, especially Nick, and she asks him if he's ever slept with someone while he's married and if he wants a cigarette. With Nick continuing to ignore her, the interrogation continues. They then ask Catherine how she met Johnny, and she explains that she wanted to write a book about the murder of a retired rock and roll star, so she went to his club, picked him up, and slept with him. Catherine then offers to take a lie detector test, which she passes with flying colors. With no proof that she committed murder, Catherine is set free. She asks the detectives if anyone could give her a ride home, and Nick volunteers without hesitation. After taking Catherine home, Nick follows his colleagues to a bar to drink with them. Curious about Catherine and Nick's relationship, Walker asks him why Catherine is always asking him personal questions. Since Nick knows where this is going, he makes it clear to Walter that he and Catherine don't know each other. Nick takes a drink even though he's trying to stay sober, then tells Walker not to rule out her involvement in the murder. He asks Walker to consider the death of Catherine's parents and the books she's published, asserting that all of her books might have a way of coming true. However, Walker dismisses his request. While talking about Catherine, Beth suddenly shows up at the bar. With her watching from afar, one of Nick's colleagues, Nielsen, mocks him for drinking, even calling him a shooter. This pisses Nick off, so he warns Nielsen to leave him alone, spurring Beth to quickly break off the fight. Nick and Beth then leave the bar together for her place, where they roughly make love. After that, they talk about Catherine. Nick learns that Beth went to Berkeley with her and that they even shared some classes. In another briefing, the detectives discover that a professor from Berkeley was murdered in his bed with an ice pick in 1980. When Nick asks if Catherine was there at that time, Walker confirms that she was. Following this lead, Walker orders the detectives to find out more about her books and the death of her parents, while Nick is tasked to focus on Catherine herself. One day, Nick is following Catherine, and he finds her in the house of a woman named Hazel Dawkins. Nick stays in his car to watch from a distance, and when Catherine comes out, he follows her again. This time, he follows her back to her house. From the outside, he watches Catherine undress, but with her turning the lights off, Nick is forced to leave. Back in the station, he does some digging on Hazel Dawkins and finds out that she was charged with homicide, but she was released from prison years ago. While Nick is researching, Gus suddenly shows up and informs him that the dead professor from Berkeley, Noah Goldstein, was Catherine's counselor and that she wasn't a suspect in Noah's case. When Gus reads Hazel's name on the monitor, he tells Nick that she murdered her husband and 3 young children years ago. She didn't even deny the murder, nor did she know why she did it. Nick goes back to Catherine's house to ask her some questions, and as they go inside, he sees the old newspapers about a shooting incident. Before he could ask her about the newspapers, Catherine tells him that she's using him as an inspiration for the main character in her new book. While Catherine prepares their drink, Nick asks her about Noah Goldstein and Hazel Dawkins. Catherine says that Noah was her counselor during her freshman year, adding that that's probably where she got the idea of the ice pick for her book. She also says that Hazel's her friend who has helped her understand more about homicidal impulse. Then, Catherine tries to learn more about Nick's shooting incident, all while seducing him. She provokes Nick, asking how much coke he'd taken that day and if that's the reason why his wife killed herself. Having had enough, Nick pushes Catherine away. Roxy shows up, and the two kiss in front of an angered Nick. Still outraged, he heads to Beth's office and demands her to tell him who has access to his files, and she says it's Nielsen. Nick then confronts Nielsen and accuses him of selling Catherine his files, but Nielsen vehemently denies it. Before things could get worse, their colleagues break off the fight, and Nick leaves the office. Gus catches up to his car, and Nick claims that Catherine knows everything about him and that she's coming for him. That night, Beth visits Nick in his apartment, and the two get into an argument which escalates to a physical fight because of Nielsen. When Beth finally calms down, she tells Nick that she had to give Nielsen his psychiatric files because he was going to recommend Nick's discharge from the force since Nielsen claimed her evaluation of him to be unobjective. In an attempt to help Nick, Beth says she gave Nielsen his files so he could review them himself, but she didn't think he'd show it to anyone. With no idea what to say to Beth, Nick just asks her to leave. After falling asleep, Nick is called to a murder scene, where they find Nielsen's body inside his car, with a close-range gunshot wound to the head. Gus says the murder weapon is probably a .38 caliber revolver, and when Walker asks for Nick's gun, he surrenders it without hesitation. Nick is taken in for questioning, where he admits that he lost his temper and went after Nielsen. Beth then shows up and tells everyone that she was at Nick's apartment the previous night for about 15 minutes to talk about his altercation with Nielsen. She also says that after Nick has expressed regret about the incident, she left his apartment. For the record, Walker asks Nick if he killed Nielsen, and he firmly denies it. Unhappy with the turn of events, Captain Talcott puts Nick on leave. Before going home, Nick learns from Andrews that Catherine's parents' boat blew due to a leak in the fuel line. Andrew adds that there were 2 previous repairs and a $5 million policy on both of them. Convinced that Catherine is involved somehow, Nick tells Walker that she killed Nielsen, but Walker just orders him to stay away from her. When Nick gets home, he finds Catherine waiting for him outside. He invites her for a drink in his apartment, then asks how much she paid Nielsen for his files, but Catherine dodges the question. They start to drink, and Catherine gives him a book about a boy who killed his parents to see if he could get away with it. She tells him that she wrote that book years after her parents died. Before finally leaving Nick's place, Catherine tells him that she'll be at Johnny's club in the evening, just in case he wants to follow her. On her way down the stairs, Catherine sees and greets Gus, who is shocked to see her at Nick's place. That night, Nick goes to Johnny's club and finds Catherine and Roxy using coke in the bathroom. On the dance floor, Roxy gets jealous as Catherine seductively dances with Nick, and the two end up kissing. Nick and Catherine eventually make love roughly in her bed, with Catherine tying Nick's hands to the bed using a white, silk scarf. When Catherine falls asleep, Nick goes to the bathroom to wash up. Suddenly, Roxy shows up and threatens to kill him if he doesn't leave Catherine alone. Provoking Roxy, Nick asks her how long she's been there, and Roxy simply tells him that Catherine likes her to watch. With that, she leaves. The following night, Nick and Gus meet, and Gus learns that Nick has slept with Catherine. Though Gus disapproves of Nick's decision, he proceeds to tell Nick that Internal Affairs has found Nielsen's safety deposit box. It had $50,000 in it, taken out 3 months ago, and wasn't used since. Confused, Nick observes that it doesn't make any sense since Catherine didn't know him 3 months ago. As Nick and Gus go their separate ways, a black car tries to run Nick over. The car successfully hits him the first time, but Nick manages to avoid it the second and third time. He quickly gets in his car and follows the black vehicle, but the car crashes, revealing Roxy to be the driver. She dies on the spot, and the authorities soon come to collect her body and the car. However, Walker doesn't believe Nick's account of what happened, especially after learning that the car is Catherine's. Nick visits Catherine to see how she's doing, and Catherine is devastated over Roxy's death. She tells Nick that everyone she cares about dies, then asks him to make love to her. After that, Nick asks Catherine if she thinks Roxy killed Johnny, but Catherine is sure that Roxy wouldn't do anything that might cause her harm. She starts telling him about a girl she slept with in college, and Catherine asserts that the girl, Lisa Oberman, started following her around and taking her pictures. Lisa imitated the way Catherine dressed and even dyed her hair to be like hers. She says that it was awful, but Nick is just surprised to hear her confess about anything at all. Back at the station, Nick learns that Roxy killed her 2 younger brothers when she was only 16 and that she did it on impulse. As Nick and Gus leave the station, Nick tells his partner that he isn't sure about Catherine being Johnny's killer anymore, making Gus mad. Later on, Nick goes to Berkeley to look for Lisa's records, but he doesn't find any. When he goes to Catherine's place to ask her about it, he finds her with Hazel Dobkins, and Catherine introduces them to each other. Once Hazel is out of earshot, Nick tells Catherine that Lisa Oberman isn't on Berkeley's list of students. Though she's angry that Nick is investigating her, she corrects him, saying that it's Hoberman, before leaving. When Nick calls the school to confirm it, they report that Lisa Hoberman did attend their school. Enlisting Andrews' help, Nick learns that Lisa Hoberman is actually Beth Garner. Nick confronts Beth at her apartment, and after admitting that she slept with Catherine once, Beth insists that Catherine had developed a fixation with her and that she started imitating the way she looked and dressed. Now, Nick has 2 versions of the same story, and he's mad that Beth didn't say anything. Beth only insists that Catherine is both a liar and very ill. Fed up with her, Nick leaves Beth to go home. Catherine's waiting for Nick in his apartment, and he confronts her about her story involving Beth. She sticks to her account, claiming that she even filed a report against Beth. Nick starts looking for the report, and he discovers that Nielsen used to have it. He discusses this with Gus, and he concludes that Beth killed Nielsen since he found out about the report against her in Berkeley. This leads to an argument between the two, with Nick believing Catherine's story while Gus doesn't. Nick then goes looking for Beth's husband, Dr. Joseph Garner, and he learns that the man died 6 years ago. To learn more about him, Nick goes to the local police. According to the cop, Joseph was walking home one day when somebody just drove up and shot him with a .38 revolver. The cop says that there were no suspects, not even Beth. It's also revealed that Nielsen asked the same cop the same questions a year ago, and that there were rumors that Beth's girlfriend was the one who killed her husband. At Catherine's place, Nick sees an excerpt of her story. There, the detective's partner dies in an elevator. When Catherine shows up, she tells Nick that she finished her book. When Nick asks about the ending, Catherine answers that she already told him that the girlfriend kills him in the end. With that, Catherine bids Nick goodbye. She finished her book, his character's dead, it's over between them. Of course, this leaves Nick upset. Gus then picks him up to visit Catherine's roommate in Oakland from her freshman year. According to Gus, the woman knows a lot about Catherine and Beth, then adds that Johnny's psychiatrist used to share office space with Beth. Upon reaching their destination, Gus goes to suite 405 while Nick stays in the car. Gus is riding the elevator when Nick suddenly remembers Catherine's book. He runs for the hotel to save his friend, but as soon as the elevator opens on the 4th floor, Gus is repeatedly stabbed with an ice pick by someone wearing a black hooded coat. By the time he arrived, Nick finds Gus in the exact same manner as described in Catherine's book, and Nick failed to save him. When he hears a sound from afar, Nick takes Gus' gun and sees Beth in the hallway, who claims that she received a message to meet Gus there. Nick points the gun at her and warns her not to move, announcing that he knows about her husband. Despite his warnings, Beth starts walking toward him with her hand in her pocket. Thinking it might be a weapon, Nick shoots Beth, only to find out that she was playing with her keychain. The authorities arrive at the scene, and as Walker starts questioning Nick, he is called by Andrews to the stairs, where they find a blonde wig, an ice pick, and a coat that belongs to the SFPD. When they check Beth's apartment, they find a .38 caliber revolver there, along with other evidence that implicates her in Johnny, Nielsen, and Gus's murders. They also find newspaper clippings and photographs of Catherine and her ex-fiancé. After a thorough investigation, they all learn that the gun found in Beth's apartment matches the bullet that was used on Nielsen and that Catherine's roommate had already died 2 years ago. The entire thing leaves Nick confused, and he goes home where Catherine is waiting for him. She explains why she broke up with him, confessing she can't allow herself to care for him, and that she's scared of losing him. The two make love once again, and as they do, an ice pick is revealed to be under the bed. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.